In the village of Ayetoro, there was a man whose wealth knew no bounds. His name was Adekunle, and people spoke of his riches like they spoke of the rain, natural and abundant. Adekunle was the richest man the village had ever known. His home sat at the heart of Ayetoro, a grand mansion surrounded by gardens so beautiful that visitors would stop just to admire them. His cattle grazed in the fields as far as the eye could see. His land stretched beyond the hills, and his barns were filled with crops. If you walked through the market, you could see that half of the stalls belonged to him, and every man, woman, and child knew his name. Yet, despite all this wealth, Adekunle was missing one thing: love. He had always believed that love was something that would come to him when the time was right. But as the years passed, he began to wonder if it would ever come. One fateful day, while visiting a nearby village to check on his lands, Adekunle met a woman named Morayo. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her smile could light up the darkest night, and her laughter was like music to his ears. Morayo came from a wealthy family too, and the father owned many lands. She was elegant, graceful, and everyone in the village admired her. Adekunle fell deeply in love with Morayo, and before long, they were married in the grandest wedding the village had ever seen. People talked about the celebration for months. Adekunle was sure that his life was perfect now, that he had found the love he had been waiting for. But soon, everything began to change. As time passed, Adekunle noticed that Morayo had little interest in his simple life in Ayetoro. She liked the idea of being married to the richest man in the village, but she didn't care for the responsibilities that came with it. She often left for the city, staying away for days, sometimes weeks, while Adekunle remained in the village, managing his lands and businesses. Morayo spent money recklessly. She bought expensive clothes, threw lavish parties, and surrounded herself with people who only cared for her wealth. Soon, the riches that Adekunle had spent years building began to disappear. But Adekunle, blinded by his love for her, didn't see the warning signs. He gave her everything she asked for, thinking that if he could make her happy, their love would last. One day, after returning from a trip to the city, Morayo gave Adekunle devastating news. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice cold and distant. "I'm moving to the city for good. This life here is too small for me." Adekunle's heart sank. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "But what about us? What about our marriage?" he asked, his voice trembling. Morayo shrugged. "I don't love you anymore, Adekunle. You are no longer the rich man I married. Your wealth is gone, and I have no reason to stay." And just like that, Morayo left him. Adekunle was crushed. The woman he had loved so deeply had taken his heart and his wealth and left him with nothing. His businesses began to crumble. His lands were sold to pay off debts, and his grand mansion slowly fell into ruin. Soon, the man who had once been the richest in the village was no better than a beggar. With nowhere else to turn, Adekunle took up residence in a small, run-down cottage at the edge of the village. He lived simply, working odd jobs to survive. People who once greeted him with respect now looked at him with pity. Some even laughed at his misfortune, reminding him of how quickly wealth can disappear. One day, while walking in the village market, Adekunle met a woman named Adebimpe. She was a maid working in one of the wealthiest homes in Ayetoro, but unlike Morayo, Adebimpe was not admired. She was despised by nearly everyone in the village. People whispered behind her back, calling her names and spreading cruel rumors. They said she was ugly, dirty, and unworthy of love. Even the other servants in the house where she worked treated her with disrespect. But Adekunle, who had learnt the hard way that appearances could be deceiving, saw something different in her. Adebimpe was quiet, humble, and hardworking. She had a kindness in her that no one seemed to notice. She did her job without complaints and always found a way to smile, even when people were unkind to her. One evening, as Adekunle sat by the river, watching the sunset, Adebimpe passed by on her way home from work. Seeing him sitting alone, she stopped and offered him a small loaf of bread. "I noticed you haven't eaten today," she said softly, handing him the bread. Adekunle was surprised by her kindness. "Thank you," he said, taking the bread. "You didn't have to do that." Adebimpe smiled. "Kindness costs nothing," she replied before walking away. From that day on, Adekunle and Adebimpe often crossed paths. They began to talk more and more, and Adekunle found himself drawn to her simple, gentle nature. She didn't care that he was no longer rich, and she never asked about his past. To her, Adekunle was simply a kind man who had fallen on hard times, and she treated him with the respect that no one else did. As the months passed, Adekunle realized that he had fallen in love with Adebimpe. It wasn't the kind of love that swept him off his feet like it had with Morayo. This love was different, calm, steady, and real. But Adebimpe was the most despised maid in the village. How could he love someone who was treated so poorly by everyone else? What would people say? One evening, as they sat by the river, Adekunle finally spoke. "Adebimpe, there is something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice low. She looked at him, her kind eyes shining in the fading light. "What is it, Adekunle?" "I love you," he said, the words tumbling out of it before he could stop them. "I know I don't have anything to offer, and I know people treat you unfairly. But I don't care about any of that. I love you for who you are." For a moment, Adebimpe said nothing. Then she smiled softly. "I love you too, Adekunle." not because of who you were, but because of who you are now. Adekunle felt a wave of relief wash over him. In that moment, he realized that it didn't matter what people thought. Adebimpe was the one who had stood by him when no one else did. And that was all that mattered. Soon after, they were married in a simple ceremony. There were no grand celebrations like Adekunle's first wedding. No lavish parties or expensive gifts. But it didn't matter. For the first time, Adekunle felt truly happy. After their marriage, Adekunle and Adebimpe worked together to rebuild their lives. Adebimpe continued to work as a maid, while Adekunle took on any job he could find. They lived modestly, saving every penny they could. But something strange began to happen. One day, while walking in the market, Adekunle overheard a conversation between two traders. They were talking about a piece of land that no one wanted because it was thought to be cursed. Adekunle, seeing an opportunity, bought the land with the little money he had saved. It was a risk, but he had nothing left to lose. He and Adebimpe worked tirelessly to clear the land and plant crops. At first, the villagers laughed at him. Who would want crops from cursed lands? They sneered. But Adekunle didn't listen to them. He and Adebimpe worked day and night, planting and tending to the crops. And then, something miraculous happened. The land, which had been barren for years, produced the most abundant harvest the village had ever seen. Word spread quickly, and soon, people were lining up to buy from Adekunle's farm. His business grew, and before long, he was able to buy more land. As the year passed, Adekunle's wealth returned. Only this time, it was even greater than before. People who had once laughed at him now spoke of him with respect. They marveled at how the man who had lost everything had become the richest in the village once again. And through it all, Adebimpe remained by his side, his partner in both life and business. Adekunle's story became one that people in Ayetoro would tell for generations. It wasn't just a story about wealth or success. It was a story about love, resilience, and the importance of looking beyond appearances. Adekunle learned that true wealth wasn't in the money or the land he owned. It was in the love and partnership he found with Adebimpe, the woman who had been despised by the world but cherished by him. And the villagers learned an important lesson too. Never judge someone based on what others say. The woman they had mocked and rejected became the wife of the richest man in the village, and together they built a life that was stronger and richer than anyone could have imagined. In the end, Adekunle and Adebimpe proved that love, hard work, and kindness could overcome anything, even the cruelest judgments and the hardest losses. And that is a lesson the village of Ayetoro will never forget. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and share with your loved ones. And let me know what you learned in the comment section. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Until next time, bye.